If you were standing on the floor of the New York Commodities Exchange on the morning of March 27, 1980, you weren't watching a market crash. You were watching a crime scene. Grown men, veteran traders who had survived the Great Depression, were screaming into telephones. The ticker tape machine was physically lagging 20 minutes behind reality because the price was falling faster than the ink could print. In the span of a single morning, $5 billion of wealth didn't just disappear, it was stolen. Moments earlier, a group of shadowy figures, the governors of the exchange, had gathered in a private room and activated a kill switch. They secretly changed the rules of the game in the middle of the hand. Why? To destroy two men, two brothers from Texas who had done the unthinkable. They didn't just beat Wall Street, they bought it. They told you the Hunt brothers were greedy cowboys. That is the lie they teach in business school. The truth is found in the declassified cables and the private diaries of the men who were there. This wasn't a trade. It was a war. On one side, the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government. On the other, two billionaires and a syndicate of Saudi princes who wanted to kill the U.S. dollar. This is Declassified File 80.2, the story of the time the government had to break the law to save it. To understand the motive, you have to understand the anger. The year is 1979. America is angry. Imagine working your entire life, saving every penny, and watching the government burn it in front of your eyes. As we revealed in File 71.8, Richard Nixon severed the dollar from gold in 1971. He promised it would be stable. He lied. By 1979, inflation in America wasn't just a number. It was a predator. It was hitting 14%. That means if you had $100,000 in the bank in January, by December, the government had effectively stolen $14,000 of your purchasing power. Enter Nelson Bunker Hunt. He was a heavy-set, poker-playing, hamburger-eating tycoon from Dallas. He didn't trust Washington. He didn't trust the banks, and he absolutely hated the Federal Reserve. He viewed the paper dollar as a fraud, a fiat promise backed by politicians he despised. Bunker Hunt famously said, "Any idiot can run a printing press." He had billions of dollars in oil wealth, but he knew that if he kept it in cash, the inflation monster would eat it. He needed an arc. He needed something the Federal Reserve couldn't print, something the government couldn't devalue, and something he could hold in his hand. He looked at gold, but in the 1970s, the market was too big and government regulations were too tight. Then he looked at the periodic table. Element 47, a G silver. Silver was different. It wasn't just money. It was strategic. It was used in every roll of film, every circuit board, every medical device. The world needed silver to function. Bunker Hunt called his brother William Herbert Hunt. They sat down in a quiet room in Texas and they did the math. They realized something terrifying. The price of silver was artificially low. There was actually a shortage. If someone with deep pockets and nerves of steel started buying up the supply, the price wouldn't just go up, it would go vertical. They didn't just want to make money. They wanted to punish the system that was destroying the dollar. They were going to corner the market. In 1979, the buying began. But this wasn't normal investing. This was a hostile takeover of a global commodity. Usually when Wall Street trades commodities, they use futures contracts. It's a paper bet. You bet the price goes up, you take your cash profit, and you go home. You never actually see the metal. The Hunts didn't want paper. They hated paper. When their contracts expired, they shocked the exchange. They demanded physical delivery. They sent armored Brinks trucks to the warehouses in Chicago and New York. They loaded millions of ounces of silver bullion onto the trucks. Then they loaded the bullion onto private Boeing 707 jets and flew it out of the country to secret vaults in Switzerland. They were draining the physical inventory of the planet Earth. Wall Street laughed at first. They called them dumb hicks. They said they'll run out of money eventually. But Wall Street didn't know about the secret meeting in Paris. Bunker Hunt knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed allies who hated the dollar as much as he did. He found them in the Middle East. Declassified intelligence reveals that the Hunts formed a secret partnership with members of the Saudi royal family. These were the petrodollar princes we talked about in previous files. They were swimming in cash, and they were terrified the US dollar was going to collapse. They formed a syndicate called IMIC. Suddenly, you had Texas oil money and Saudi royal money attacking the silver market at the same time. The price began to scream. By late 1979, the panic hit Main Street, USA. People were ripping the silverware out of their dining room drawers to melt it down. Jewelry stores were being robbed in broad daylight. The Hunts kept buying. By January 1980, the syndicate controlled over 200 million ounces of silver. That was half the deliverable supply of the entire world. Their hoard was worth more than the gold reserves of most European nations. The price hit $30, then $40, and then in mid-January 1980, it touched $50 an ounce. This is where the story turns from a trade into a national emergency. Why did the government care if silver was expensive? Because the banks were on the wrong side of the bet. Major bullion banks, the establishment firms that ran Wall Street, had bet against silver. They were short. They assumed the price would stay low. When silver hit $50, these banks were looking at billions of dollars in losses. They were technically insolvent. If the Hunts demanded their money, the banks would fail. If the banks failed, the stock market would crash. If the stock market crashed, the U.S. economy, already weak from inflation, would collapse. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volcker, was watching this nightmare unfold. The establishment realized the Hunts have won. We are checkmated. But in a casino, the house never loses. If you win too much, they don't pay you. They kick you out. January 21st, 1980. The governors of the COMEX exchange held a secret emergency session. The Hunts were not invited. They passed a new regulation, Silver Rule 7. It was a rule that defied every principle of the free market. They declared that effective immediately, buying was illegal. You heard that right. You could sell silver, but you could not open a new buy order. Imagine walking into a grocery store and being told it is illegal to buy milk, but the store is allowed to sell it. What happens to the price? If there are 0 buyers allowed, the price can only go one direction, straight down. This was the trap. The price crashed, 50, 40, 30, and as the price fell, the banks triggered the margin call. This is how they kill you. The Hunts had borrowed money to buy some of that silver. As long as the price was up, the loans were safe. But when the price dropped, the banks demanded cash, immediate cash, hundreds of millions of dollars a day. The Hunts tried to sell to raise cash, but remember Rule 7? Everyone was selling. No one was buying. The floor had dropped out. They were bleeding to death. On March the 27th, Silver Thursday, the end came. The price hit $10. The Hunts couldn't make the payment. They defaulted in a single day. A fortune that took decades to build was dismantled. The banks seized the silver, seized the oil wells, seized the assets. The establishment had successfully engineered a crash to save themselves. When Nelson Bunker Hunt was dragged before Congress to explain himself, a senator asked him a snarky question. "Mr. Hunt, are you still a billionaire?" Hunt looked at him, shrugged his shoulders, and delivered the epitaph of the 1970s. $1 billion isn't what it used to be. The lesson of the silver corner is brutal. The markets are free as long as the insiders are winning. But if you are an outsider and you threaten the existence of the dollar, they will rewrite the rulebook to stop you. The Hunts failed. They couldn't kill the inflation monster. And that left the job to one man, a man who was 6'7", a man who hated speculators, hated gold, and was willing to inflict massive pain on the American people to save the system. His name was Paul Volcker. And as the Hunt brothers walked away in ruin, Volcker was just rolling up his sleeves. But that is the story for our next file. The files are open. This history has been declassified.